All right, hey guys, welcome to Mercy Hill at both campuses today. We're going to say welcome. We had a really good start to our new sermon series last week, and we're going to dive right back into Genesis 1. So if you have a copy of Scripture, you can take it out and turn with me to Genesis 1. Last week we talked about this a little bit. Today we build off of it. That is the idea that being lost is less about not knowing your destination and more about not knowing your starting point. Many of us, if we've ever been lost in our life, if you ever had to ask for directions for somebody, you knew in your mind where you were going. The problem was if you can't figure out where you are or you have lost the origin, it is impossible for you to get where you're going, and that is where our culture is. A lot of us are free-floating. We feel things like meaning and purpose and desire, and we feel like our life means something, and we know we're on a journey, and we feel like it all ends somewhere. But because we've lost the starting point, we're sort of floating and we're sort of lost. And when that happens, practical issues sort of get out of whack in our lives and certainly in our culture. Today we're going to pick up one of those, which is the idea of creation care, caring for the earth. How should we think about the environment? How should we think about this world that we live in? Feeling the destination means that all of us probably in some degree understand and we feel like we should care for the earth. We feel like we should care about this world that we live in. But having lost the starting place means that we don't know how to do that. We're not even sure how to begin to do that. And a lot of times we're not sure what it should look like. And man, it can end up in our lives looking like a lot of different kind of crazy things. So let me go ahead and give you the big idea of where we're going today, and then I'm going to give you a couple disclaimers, and then we'll dive in, all right? So here's the big idea. This is where we're going. It is only in understanding God's role in creation that enables us to understand our role in creation. Without understanding that this is His world that He created and He gave us a purpose in that, we can never understand what we are supposed to do. We can't live by design if we have lost the entire idea of a grand design. With God out of the center, with the Creator out of the center, we will probably drive the proverbial car off the road into one ditch or the other, okay? If God is not in the middle, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up thinking about the world and the environment, and we're going to make it overly important in our lives, or we're going to have it be way under important in our lives. It's going to mean way too much to us, or it's not going to mean enough. It's not going to be important enough on this side, or it's going to be way too important on the other. All of us probably lean one of those ways. We probably, if we took our hand off the wheel, we probably end up going off the road in one of those two areas. The first being that it just means way too much to us. We think too highly of creation. And what I mean by that is, man, you just see this in our culture. It's environmentalism on steroids. It leads people to do things like this. I saw a rally the other day where people were holding signs that said, "Save the planet, kill yourselves." It was talking about the humans. If the humans would just be out of the way, then the planet could flourish. And many of you have seen this, heard this. That's holding to a too high view of creation. On the other side, of course, and this might be where some of us are, certainly where many of us in culture are, we just don't give a rip about the earth. We don't care at all. Litter, destruction, discard it, use it up, and then throw it away as long as we get ahead and we get ours. The funny thing is, people don't realize this. If you're on either end of the extreme, both of those are produced from the same place of losing the starting point. If you lose the starting point, you go overly extreme on one side and you end up thinking too highly, or you don't think highly enough. What we need to do is we need to recover the origin, recover the starting place, see that God is creator, and in that, I think we're going to be able to understand our place and not think about it too highly or not highly enough, but be in the middle. All right, let me give you one disclaimer before we dive in, because I think that I might fear that in our day, I may have already lost some people just because of the subject matter of the sermon. So let me give you this. I am not going to preach for 40 minutes as hard as I can from Genesis 1 and then the application be you need to go recycle, okay? That's not going to be I'm not going to try to convince you today that you need to sell your truck and go buy a Prius. Thank God that's not the application, okay, for me. But listen, I'm not going to try to give you answers to a few particular environmental issues. I'm going to try to give you a paradigm in which you can think about all of these issues. I mean, every environmental issue that I can think of and that I have researched at all, there are counter-arguments and counter-arguments to the arguments, and it is really an endless sort of morass. You're not sure where you're even supposed to go or land. Some of you might say, just take any issue. Should we use pesticides at all in the world? There are people that say, no way, that's poison to the earth. And then you live in Zambia where thousands of people die of malaria every year. Every single one of these issues, it's an endless amount of arguments, counter arguments. I'm not going to try to give you specific answers to a few issues. I want to give you a paradigm as a Christian to think about all of these issues. And if you're not a Christian, I want you to be drawn in to realize this worldview that I'm going to espouse is the one that keeps us in balance from thinking too highly or not highly enough. All right? I hope that after today, we're going to think about the world in a new way. We're going to be able to see that being human means having dominion, authority, being a servant ruler over the earth. We got to understand what dominion means and what God has for us in Genesis 1 if we're to be a human rightly, okay? If we're to steward the earth rightly and be rulers here, and what does the Bible mean by that, all right? So let's dive in. We're going to go in Genesis 1. I'm going to spend some time kind of explaining a bunch of different things as we go all the way through the chapter. We're going to skip all the way through the chapter, try to get to sort of the big idea here, and then we'll land on some things that we ought not do, both sides of the road, and then what we should do in terms of creation care, all right? Let's dive into Genesis chapter 1. Let's start in verse 3. This is where we left off last week. We'll pick up this week. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness, and he called the light day, and he called the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Now I'm going to skip through here in just a minute, so let me just make sure we understand. This is going to be the pattern throughout all of creation. And God said, and there was. And he does this in 6 days. He rests on the seventh day. But what we have first is the first half of creation dealing with the environment. What I mean is just the actual land, the sky, the water, not the animals. But the first part of creation, the first all the way through day 4, is just the kind of the earth and the atmosphere that we live in. And so he creates light and darkness and all that. And then here's what we have. The next day, it's the sky and the atmosphere. The next day, day 3, it's the water being separated from land and vegetation. Now that's going to bring us up to day 4, all right? Look at verse 14. And then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, for the days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the 2 great lights, and the great light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars, the lights, and the dark. Now, I wanted to stop here again, because if you read verse 1 and then you read verse 14, you're like, wait a minute, I thought there was already light. There was already light. What's happening in verse 14, 15, what's happening sort of the end of the environmental part of creation is that, yes, God has already created. Now it is like he is spinning the universe into existence. That's why it says the signs and the seasons. Okay, so is there already something that's going on? It's almost, actually the wording here in Genesis 1, it's like maybe God is now fashioning these things, even the sun and the moon. They're being fashioned. It's interesting that Moses didn't use the words sun and moon. Those were pagan gods. He says the greater light and the lesser light. Now, here's why I want to stop here right in the middle, because we have environment that has been created. This stuff is finely tuned, is it not? I mean, you think about just the stars and the universe and all of this that God has now created. I mean, everything that we see in the world. I think about specifically this part, verse 14, 15, about the stars and the universe and just everything that we see. These huge distances and the beauty that is out there and all of it resounding the glory of God. We talked about this last week. Let me just give you a little drive-by. Did this all happen by chance? It's so finely tuned that it's just hard to believe. One time, there's a story told of Sir Isaac Newton that he created an exact miniature replica of the sun and the planets and the stars and all this stuff going around. And it had rods and gears and cranks, and when he would crank it, it would move all the exact way that it's supposed to move. And one day his friend came in and said, "Hey, who made you that?" And he said, facetiously, he was being sarcastic, he said, "Oh, nobody made it. Yeah, I would have you believe that all these balls and belts and rods and gears just happen to come together and all revolve in perfect order and in perfect timing just by chance. If the replica couldn't be made by chance, then how can we even imagine that all of this universe was made by chance?" Day 4 ends the environment, okay? The environment part of creation is done, and now that leads us to the life part of creation. And what I want you to see just for a minute, and I'm going to pick this up later in the sermon, is that there is a hierarchy here, okay? Environment, then animals, then us. That's kind of how it goes. And what I mean by that is this. God creates the environment for the creatures. It is not the other way around. There is a gradation. Yes, everything in creation is precious, but that is not the same thing as saying that none of it is more precious than others. Okay, it is made in a certain way. The environment first, then you have the animals, then you have us. And it's made in a very poetic way, okay? So if you think back, the way it happened in terms of days are water, sky, land. Well, guess what's going to happen now? Fish, birds, animals, okay, that correspond. So fish, birds, animals, you get all the way at the end of day 5, fish and birds are made, and then we get into animals being made. There's always a building here. We're building all the way up. The animals are a big deal, and then we're going to move into mankind being made. But look what it says in verse 24. Let's get down. Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth, third time I've said this, all right, according to their kinds, and livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. You get the idea. And God saw that it was good. I've got to slow down here for just a minute, right? As it keeps saying, according to its kind, we've all got to be able to realize, and every weekend at Mercy Hill, at both campuses, no matter where you are, there are people that are going to be coming in from a lot of different worldviews, and many of you here today might be hung up on evolution. Because you say, well, evolution is just a fact, and Christianity is at odds with evolution. Is that true? Well, I want to talk about that for just a minute. First of all, when you say evolution, you have to be very particular about what you mean. Because to say that Christians don't believe in microevolution would be crazy. That microevolution is small variants within species over time. It makes sense to us. You don't have to be a genius to understand that the baddest lion in the jungle is the one that passes on his genes, okay? That doesn't take a rocket scientist. We all understand microevolution. We understand it in a lot of ways, maybe ways we don't think about. I'll give you a quick illustration of this. I've told this story before, but in 1972, maybe some of you even remember, you've seen the movie, at the Belmont Stakes, a racehorse Secretariat lined up. He had the chance to win the Triple Crown. And it's a pretty great feat in and of itself, but nobody could have imagined what he was going to do. Halfway through the race, people were gasping because of what was happening. This horse was pushing the limits, pole after pole. He was going faster and faster and faster. He should have been slowing down, but he was speeding up. And everybody knew, and there was people that honestly believed this horse had such a will to win that everybody knew the jockey had to hold him back, because if he truly pushed him or let him go, the horse might run himself to death. His heart might explode. He would try to run that hard. And so as he's going faster, people are getting nervous about what's going on. They come to the last stretch, and he should have faded. By every account of anybody that had seen race horsing in history, he should have been slowing down. He just kept getting faster and faster. Y'all, he won the race by 31 lengths. He ran 1.5 miles in 2 minutes and 24 seconds flat. Is how fast this horse ran. Here's my point about microevolution. A horse like that don't just happen. It's bred for hundreds of years to be able to run 1.5 miles in 2 minutes, 24 seconds flat. How does that happen? It's microevolution. It's the picking of genes, and it's all of that goes into it. We all understand that. So when you say evolution, yes, is it at odds with Christianity? Well, that part is not. The part that may be is when you start talking about the idea of macro-Darwinian evolution, where things are not, quote, according to their kind, okay? Now, maybe you would say, yeah, but that's the part that I'm hung up on. If that's the part that you're hung up on, let me talk to you about it for just a minute. Some of you, this is a big stumbling block, and I just want to try to shake that foundation, just give you some things to think about, okay? For many of us, you're sold a bill of goods your whole life, which is macro-Darwinian evolution, that things change. Yes, the proverbial monkey can become a man, that kind of idea. You're sold that your whole life. I know this is true because when I talk to people that aren't believers, when I ask them why they believe in evolution, they say because everybody does. And you say, no, that's not an argument. That's just like, why? Well, just because everybody, that's just what we're always told that. But is there holes? Man, there are so many holes, and I just want to pick one because it's a factual thing that leads into a worldview thing, which I think is very important, okay? Let me give you a factual thing that leads into a worldview thing. The factual thing is this. Does the fossil record support macro-Darwinian evolution, that species change from one species to another species over time? The fact is, it just doesn't. Darwin understood this. When he was doing his work, 1800s, Darwin even basically said, the problem with the fossil record is that it is undiscovered to this point. But later on, what we are going to understand, this is me interpreting him now, later on what we're going to understand is that as more and more comes out, more of these transitional species are going to be found. The problem is, the last 150 years, that has not been the case. Pretty much the opposite. That what science tells us is that in the fossil record, which is the only evidence for something like macro-Darwinian evolution, the fossil record shows us that species pretty much stay species. You don't go back and see the evolution in the fossil record. So enter the 1970s, a man named Stephen Jay Gould, who understood the weakness in Darwin, ends up bringing to light what all the scientists already knew, what the public didn't really know, which is that the fossil record doesn't really support this. So trying to strengthen Darwin, you know what he says? He says, hey, I think I've got the answer. The answer is a thing called punctuated equilibrium, that things don't evolve like that over time, just suddenly out of nowhere because of a reason that we don't know. Then a species will just all of a sudden evolve completely and totally to another species. So yes, basically what he's saying is if it happened today, a horse, we would go to bed tonight as a horse, and tomorrow we'd wake up and the horses would change into something that can fly. It would have wings or whatever. It would change into something else. Now, the reason I bring this up is because it had a lot of acclaim and all this kind of stuff. Why do I bring this up? Because it shows the worldview of the thing. Don't you see what he's doing? He's saying the fossil record doesn't support Darwin, but I've already started with the presupposition that Darwin is right, so now I got to figure out a theory. And the theory will be that a horse can become something that flies in a day's notice or whatever. All I want you to see is this. Darwin doesn't lead people to reject God. It is rejecting God that leads people to Darwin. It is the rejecting of God that tries to get us into these theories. This is how I know this, because the commitment to the theories that are out there now, I mean, it's crazy. I was talking to a molecular biologist that's in our church, a professor at Salem College. She comes up to me after the service last week. She says, hey, the thing that drives me nuts about this stuff is that all through the years, science gets more and more in depth, and as it does, it finds more design, more complexity, more design, more complexity. But even though the complexity is something that Darwin could have never imagined, the answer never changes. The answer is one day we'll get to the bottom of it, and it's going to look more design, look more design, look more design, and there's going to be chaos at the bottom. But we just got to give us another million years. We'll figure it out. It will be chaos. We will make sure that it's chaos. It's a circular argument. It's begging the question. It's putting the premise as the conclusion and saying, hey, I've already started with the end in mind for this. And I think it's just right. One of the reasons that I think this, and this is the last thing, if you're not a believer and you're skeptical, I want you to go look this stuff up. But as this flows into worldview, okay, why am I so convinced? One of the reasons I'm so convinced is because other people are so convinced that it can't be God. That they're being convinced that it can't be and willing to believe anything else shows me that it's a rebellion issue. Let me give you an example of that. The Boston Globe this week, an article came out that basically was saying, yes, design is becoming harder and harder to deny, but the person that is writing in the Boston Globe says, but we don't have to go believe in a, quote, and he was being very facetious, magical God. Instead, we have other scientific theories that are more that are more credible, like the theory of lithopanspermia, which means aliens brought us here. That's what it means. Don't believe in the magical God. Instead, we have viable, exciting new work being done in the field of lithopanspermia. You got to be kidding me. I heard Darwin say the exact same thing when he said, finally, if we get to the bottom and there's a signature and it's all been designed, it won't mean God. It'll mean that aliens that evolved by Darwin's theory some kind of way brought us here in a spaceship. It's not a science issue. It's a rebellion issue, right? I do believe that God created. I believe that he created like this. I believe that he created according to their kinds. And when we've lost that origin, I think it's because we don't want to serve a God who created, all right? Look at verse 26. This gets into the heart of what we're talking about in terms of our environment and what we do. Then God said, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion. The whole sermon is going to be about this word dominion, over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created him. This is the pinnacle of creation. If you noticed as I was going through, when God created the universe in terms of the stars, it said, and he created the stars. That's it. You get to mankind. You get to us being made, and it says God created him in his own image. In his image, he created them. Male and female, he created them. It's poetic. It's the mountaintop. This is what all of Genesis 1 is pushing us towards, is that you are the pinnacle. When that little baby is born, that little baby means more than all the stars in the heavens. It is the mountaintop. It is the pinnacle. You have the image of God. Not an animal, not a tree. You have the image of God. And the way this connects to our sermon today is that Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, it connects the image of God to us having dominion, to us being rulers over the earth. What that means is this: we are the representatives of God on the earth to care for creation, to have authority, to be the head of. I know that in our culture, okay, the idea of authority is one of those things that is rejected at all costs. It's not that way in the Scripture. When you think about kingship, kingship. You know, one day in the new heavens, we're going to serve under a king. It's because a monarchy, if you have the right monarch, okay, if you have the right king, it's the greatest form of government that could ever be. The problem is there's no human on the face of the planet, save Jesus, that could ever be that king, because we're all sinful. We take our power and we abuse it. But if you had the right king who served the people well, he would serve to the joy of the people. It would be the joy of the people to serve under a king that was a true, godly, wise king. It would be to the joy of the earth if we would rule the earth in the way that God would have us rule the earth. That is what dominion means. It is a servant rulership over the earth. Okay. That's what it means. How does it square with where we are now? I told you there's two sides of the road that we want to avoid, and one side, and we kind of want to stay right down the center. The first side we want to avoid is this: we don't worship creation. Dominion over the earth, dominion is the word that drives this sermon. Dominion doesn't happen when we think the earth is God. If we think too highly about the earth and we worship the earth, this is called pantheism. Basically, it means that everything is one. If you've seen the movie Avatar, okay, we all plug in some kind of way, and the earth is all one. Now, for a lot of us, I don't know that we would, in our culture, even maybe some of where you are, I'm not sure that we would say, I'm like a pantheist, I think I'm God, everything's God. But you know what? Those ideas are in our heart, and they're at the root of some of our worldview, and I can tell you why. Because we may not overtly say it, but a lot of us have trouble making distinctions between the values of things. We don't want to say that one thing is over another. Even though in a created order, that's right. But the fact that we fight against that shows me we've lost something about the origin. And we sort of have bought into this idea of oneness. I mean, think about how it works out. If you lose the origin, there is no way to make sense of a hierarchy in value, but we all know that hierarchy exists. If there is a burning building, and inside that burning building is a rock, a plant, a fish, a horse, and a human, if everything is sort of one, and everything is sort of God, how could we ever make a distinction of which one we should grab and save, or if we should even put the fire out? Because the fire's a thing, right? But we all know in our heart, like, I can fight against this, and I can try to act like it's not true, and I can try to act like a fish is the same. But we all understand generally that human, that little baby that's inside, and then it pretty much walks back from there. Even if there was a horse or a fish, I wouldn't grab the rock. Why do we know that? Because there is something of an echo of eternity in our hearts that's still telling us what the truth is, even though we're fighting against it, all right? When you lose the distinctions, and you can't really make and you don't want to make those distinctions, it's because we've lost something of the origin. But I want to make sure you understand what's going on. A pantheist, someone who, even if it's not, you wouldn't say you're a pantheist, if you have those ideas about oneness and all that, you try to act like what you're doing is pulling everything up to the level of man. But Francis Schaeffer pointed this out so well. Pantheism doesn't pull the tree up to the level of man, it pushes mankind down to the level of the tree. It pushes everything down, he said, into a bog of oneness. And so what he ended up saying is that you go down this road far enough and you end up with humans being no more than a blade of grass. I think when you do that, things get pretty scary, but I think that's sort of where we are a little bit. Now, you might say, that's all philosophical, it's inconsequential to me. Really? Let me give you some examples of this. You ever heard somebody say dogs are people too? This gets every day really quick, doesn't it? Maybe you've even said that before. Dogs are people too. Well, where does that come from? It's like, man, I'm not a total pantheist. I get that, but if you lose something of the origin, then you might be willing to say, no, environment matters much as the creatures, and the people matter just as much as the creatures, or maybe the environment's more than the creatures, and that's just not right from Genesis 1. It's an overcorrection. I'll give you another example. I thought about this earlier this year. You have a gorilla that's killed at the Cincinnati Zoo because he was acting very aggressively towards a child who had fallen in. The backlash was unbelievable. Hate mail, bombing. I mean, talking about this kid's parents, that she should have been the one that had been shot. Are you kidding me? You know where that comes from? You might not say you're a pantheist, but we've lost something of the origin. Is it a tragedy? Of course it's a tragedy. It's a beautiful animal that God has made. But it's not a child. We got to be able to make those distinctions. I mean, even thinking about what we watch. I mean, I've been hypersensitive. I've been thinking about this to what my kids are seeing on TV. I remember some of the things that I saw as a kid. You know, some of y'all are younger, maybe college students now are even younger than that. You look at somebody in my generation that's like an old millennial or Gen Xer, the reason that we are so weird is because of the weird cartoons we were forced to watch in the 80s. That's just a fact, okay? I don't know if anybody here remembers Captain Planet, okay? It was very strange. You see some of this stuff that comes out and you're like, man, I feel like it all sounds kind of okay. And then you realize, wait a minute, it's talking about Captain Planet saving the world and taking pollution here. And really the problem is humanity. That's sort of the problem in the world rather than being the pinnacle of creation. I understand that humans have done crazy things. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But humans are the problem? They need to be the ones that are taken out? Man, they're the pinnacle, Genesis chapter 1. We can overcorrect and we think too highly of creation, but the other way we go is that we disregard creation. So number 2 is this: don't disregard creation. You can't have dominion if you disregard creation. On one side of the road, you think creation is God. On the other side of the road, you think God ain't got nothing to do with it. So who cares? We disregard it. You know, one author said it like this: our treatment of the earth reflects our attitude towards its maker. For many of us, the attitude towards the maker, I mean, if that's reflected in the way we treat the earth, we are in trouble, aren't we? I think there are 2 ways that we really miss this. Bruce Ashford, in his book, One Nation Under God, he outlines what he believes are the 2 reasons why we miss the idea of creation care, why we go off the other side of the road. I think they're right. 2 reasons why Christians miss creation care: politics and materialism. The first reason is politics. The fact that this issue is so politically divisive. But I got to say this just for a minute. I mean, how many issues are this way? Issues of marriage, issues of poverty, issues of the life of the unborn, issues of the environment. Are preachers not supposed to be political? These issues aren't political. These issues are Christian worldview issues. And every one of us, no matter what side of the aisle you are from, you've got to be able to say we are Christian before we are members of any political party. And when we're part of a party that gets this wrong, no matter what it is, or we're part of a party that gets one of these other issues wrong, then we need to be able to say, I'm a Christian first, and then I'm whatever. Christians, in a lot of ways, a lot of people have left the environmental issues behind. And the reason is because they have gotten it backwards. They say, well, I'm a member of whatever party, and I believe this politically or whatever. And they think, well, I think the environmental stuff has gotten lumped in with a lot of stuff that I don't agree with. If you arrive at the answer of abandoning the earth, whatever got you there is wrong thinking. It's flawed, and it's not biblical. Our politics can't drive this, but they are the problem in a lot of ways. The second thing, though, is materialism, and this is where we see just the absolute tragedies that we see in the world in terms of the environment. And you guys know what I'm talking about when you see the rubber trade and what it did in early colonization 100 years ago, 120 years ago. When you see the Soviet Union in the 1960s begin a campaign, and 50 years later, they have literally drained the 4th largest freshwater lake in all of the earth. It's gone. I mean, when you see cities in our own country that you can't even, there will be times on the news where they say, don't go outside today because of the air quality. When we see these things, we have to think, man, what is driving some of that? And you know what it is? It is materialism. What it means is, if I can get ahead economically, then who gives a rip what it means for the earth? And when we have done that, we have lost the origin. When we have done that, let me ask you a question. Would you want to serve under that king that had that attitude? Would that be the dominion of the type of king you would want to serve? I don't think so. It wouldn't be. It's just the other side of the road, but they both come from the same root. Whether you're on this side or whether you're on this side, the same root is we've lost our origin. We need to regain our origin and begin to do what humans are supposed to do, which is, third and finally, care for creation. Dominion, servant, ruler, good king. What it means over the earth for us, y'all, is this, that we would be ones who care for creation. That's good kingship. Christianity, as it almost always does, and I hope this will be attractive to some of you, maybe that are coming in today that are like, man, I'm brand new to this, I'm not a believer. This should attract you to Christianity. Christianity almost always takes the third way. It is in the middle. It's not in one of these crazy camps that is off of one side or the other. The gospel gives us a third way where we don't have to deify the environment and we don't have to demonize the environment. We can care for the environment as human beings that are made to do that. The viable answer for us is to care. The viable answer for us, the Christian answer, and this is what I'm going to try to argue, okay? For many of you here, this is the answer that you know is true even though you don't know that it's true. You know it already. You're drawn to it. You understand that there's something in the world that you should care when you see these tragedies. There's something that draws you to it, but on the other side, you know you're not a tree. You know what gives you the answer to that? The gospel. Christianity gives you the answer to that. You're not a tree, but you are supposed to care. You're actually supposed to care a lot because you're over it. It's not that you're just another one of the animals or what. No. You're like the gardener over it. So you should care a lot. The answer for us is to be human, which means that we have dominion over the world, to be a good ruler because you are the image of a good ruler. And we get this from the gospel. We look to the God who rules us. He has ruled us well. He has served us when we needed it. He not only breathed life into us once, he breathed life into us again after we lost our life through our sin. Jesus Christ created this world. That's what it means when it says God's word, that he spoke by his word. Jesus is the word. Jesus created this world. He created it in all of its beauty and its complexity, and he said it was good. It was good because it pleased God. It reflected the glory of God. This universe, our world, nature, us, we are reflectors of the glory of God. We are here to sing his praises. All of this is a resounding song to the glory of God. And you know what? You and I are drawn to that naturally. Why? Because we're a part of it. We're over it, but we are certainly a part of it. We are supposed to join in this song with the rest of the universe that does what we were created to do and therefore sings the praises and reflects the glory of this God. Y'all, it's why we are drawn to nature in the way that we are. I was watching a show this week, America's Got Talent. A bunch of these guys, there's a group of 4 guys, singers. They're from the hood. They're called Lincoln Bridge. Never seen the ocean before in their life. They make the top 10 of America's Got Talent because they're incredible. They walk out on the beach and every single one of them has never seen the ocean. They cry immediately. Why? We would all do that. We are drawn to creation, not because it's God, but because it is showing us something. It is singing a song about God, and we are drawn to that beauty. The catch is, and this is where all of us are, even if we can't put it in these words, the catch is we know we're supposed to join in this song. We see the beauty, but we understand because of our sin, we don't quite fit. You look at all the other things in the creation, which is the one that totally rebels against what it was created to do? That's us. We don't fit in. We're sort of standing on the outside looking in. Tim Keller is so formative for me in the way that I think about this. Here's what he says. He says the beauty of nature, it invites us in, but then at the same time, we know that it's singing a song that we can't sing because of our rebellion, because of our sin. Instead of joining in with the rest of creation, we said, no, we want the glory for ourselves. We don't want to be part of creation that serves God. We want creation to serve us. And because of that, we're on the outside. It's broken our relationship to God. It's broken our relationship to the world. But what I say in the beginning of this, what did I say just a minute ago? We are in the image of a good ruler. You know why? Because when it came right down to us, he doesn't leave us on the outside. He doesn't leave us in a place where we can't join in. Instead, he does what is necessary. That is what the gospel is. You know what the gospel is in short? God made and we destroyed, so Jesus was destroyed that we could be remade, that we could be put in good standing again. The penalty for our sin is the opposite of creation. It's destruction. But that's exactly what Jesus took, our penalty on the cross, in order that we could be remade, that we could come back into creation, that we could join the song and reflect God's glory like we are supposed to. When you serve a God that has gone to those great lengths to serve us, it will be our joy to think about creation and to care for it. and to rule over it in the way that we should. So where does it go? Okay, what do we do then? I told you the point isn't going to be to recycle, because it's not an issue. It's a whole way we think about issues. But what is the big takeaway? I'm going to give you two. Dominion, I think if it means anything, it means this. We should walk out of here, and this week we should enjoy creation and we should protect creation. Those are the two takeaways. Enjoy it and protect it. Enjoy creation. Love creation. Create wonder in your neighbors because of the way that you talk about and interact with God's world. Instill a love in your children for creation that really only happens by letting them interact with it, okay? You need to go camping, all right? Somebody's like, could that be potentially an application of this sermon? Yes. I think it probably could. Get the kids outside. Have you ever noticed that your kids, they want to be on a screen? We all love screens. You know what they're doing when they're on a screen, when they're watching a show? They're watching something about animals. You ever notice that? Let's get them outside. Let's teach them to love the world that God has created for us to steward, to be over. Here's the question that I have been wrestling with this week in terms of my enjoyment. Do I love creation in a way that is contagious to those that are around me? Do I talk about the things that I love in creation? Yes, mountains, beach, whatever. But also, the way that humans create cities. Me and Anna were talking about this. I'm thinking, man, I lean one way on this. I would rather be away and outside and all that stuff. So you know what we did as an actual application of this sermon? We put on our calendar to go to First Friday in downtown Greensboro in October. I need to be showing my kids that when humans create, that they create cities like this, that this is good. This is part of creation as well. Creation is not the same thing as conservation. Even cities done in the right way. This is good. We need to be enjoying what God has in a way that is contagious. But secondly, do we protect? Part of being one who is having dominion over the earth is protecting it. I don't know exactly how all this works out. I know you shouldn't drive down the road and finish your Monster Energy drink and throw it at the stop sign, okay, that's outside. I know you shouldn't litter. Come on, y'all. There's easy ones here. I know that we shouldn't. I thought about this week. My little boy, he loves to draw. And if you've ever noticed with any kids, they want to draw one picture on one piece of paper and then get another piece of paper. And I have this kind of in my mind. And I'm like, buddy, you ought to flip that paper over and try to use as much of it as you can. Why? Not because it's some weird, the earth is my mother, okay? It's not. It's because God is my father. And he has put me here to be a ruler over this earth. And he has put me here to steward it and be a good king and be wise. And so I want to instill these types of things. We need to be ones who care for animals. What does that mean? Go work it out. I know this. I remember when I was in seminary, one of the guys I respect so much at Southeastern Seminary, he's still there, he's a professor there now, but I was in school with him, a guy named Ben Quinn. Ben Quinn walked in, and our seminary also had undergrads. So there was some young guys, 18, 19 years old, and one of these guys came in, and he was kind of joking around and horsing around about how he had stood outside on his dorm room, and he had shot with a blowgun dart. He actually hit a deer with the blowgun dart, and he couldn't believe that he actually hit it, and he thought it was really funny. Ben was the wrong person to talk to about that. Ben's been a hunter since he was 5 years old. From Mississippi, parents have taught him, just generations, and he roasted him. Not some crazy environmentalism, earth is our mother, she's equal to you, none of that. Buddy, you are here to protect and take care of. You're a servant king, you rule over. You think that's funny? You think that's being a servant king? Where does the answer for something like that comes from? It comes from Genesis 1. There's 1,000 other applications we could do. I hope you can go and kind of work this out. One last thing from Francis Schaeffer. Francis Schaeffer said this, that this earth is a pilot planet. He's actually said pilot plant. I kind of turned it to pilot planet. What do you mean is this? When a company is about to build a $100 million plant, they'll build a $1 million one first to see if it all works. And they'll see if they can take care of that one before they make the $100 million one. Schaeffer said, man, this earth it's the $1 million version of the 100 million that's coming in the next life. How are we taking care of this one in anticipation of the next one? Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much, God, that even in Genesis 1, when it's huge and just big, and it's God, it's weighty, there are also practical things that we can grab onto. Father, I pray that we will be a church that goes out of here, and when we see things in creation, we will think differently about them because of this word that you've given us. God, let us have dominion. Let us rule well. Father, for those in our midst that are not believers, God, I pray that they would be drawn. Why do they care for creation? God, for those of us that might be on one side of the road or the other, we care too much, or far many of us care too little. God, that we would realize that you have given us something to do here on earth, and that's part of being human. It's part of the grand design. God, give us the ability to do these things this week. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.